So this is some news coming out of the Acolyte. According to Leslye Headland, in a recent interview with Dagobah Dispatch, the Acolyte, the upcoming 2024 High Republic show, will have a record number of Jedi, more than the Battle of Geonosis in Attack of the Clones. That's enormous, guys. So let's dive into it. One thing that makes the upcoming show so unique, apart from being set during the High Republic prior to the prequels, is that it's mostly going to be told from the point of view of the dark side, the Sith. While stories in the franchise are often shared from the perspective of the Jedi, this time it's going to be different. And we heard Leslye Headland say she's taking inspiration from what Luke said in The Last Jedi, and she's even made it clear this show is not going to be kind on them. She's about to expose the flaws of the Jedi Order. But she now says the Acolyte is going to have lots and lots of Jedi, more than we've ever seen. Here's the quote. I would say that the Acolyte stands out because it's the earliest in the Star Wars timeline that we've ever seen in live action. We are towards the end of the High Republic, leading into the prequels. George Lucas's prequels were The Phantom Menace. So we're looking at a time period where the Jedi are at the height of their power, and we're looking at a time period where there is a peace throughout the galaxy. And it was very challenging and interesting to make a Star Wars without the word war in it. To make it even more unique, the story is going to be told from the perspective of the bad guys. Leslye goes on to say, quote, though the question became, well, what should the show be about if it's not going to be about galactic conflict? And I think that's what makes this show different and interesting, is that it's from the perspective of the villains. These are people who are using the Force in their own way, dipping into the darker side of the Force and doing it without being sanctioned by a larger institution. And that to me is super fascinating because the Jedi are not going to get involved in as many ways as we think. At this stage, a lot of the Jedi aren't even aware. And she goes on to say, and this is the case with the Jedi. And I think that Star Wars is always about some version of the underdog versus the institution. She's absolutely right. In the Imperial era, it's about the rebellion versus the Empire. So even though we're going to see probably Jedi Masters like Yaddle and Yoda, or at least I hope so, it's really going to focus on others around at this time. Smaller stories that form a big part of what comes in The Phantom Menace. And the fact she mentions the show is going to lead into The Phantom Menace, going to be at the end of the High Republic, that is so exciting. So let's go to the next part of Leslie's quote. She says, and I just thought it was very interesting to do a show about the bad guys and to set that during the time period that makes the most sense. So I think that's what sets it apart. It's kind of almost flipped. We have more Jedi than you've seen in any other Star Wars content. I mean, of course she's not bearing in mind the Skywalker Saga game, but in terms of live action visual content, there are going to be more than the Battle of Geonosis, more than the Geonosian Petronarchy Arena. I mean, at least according to Leslie's estimation, she could be wrong. There were over 200 Jedi in episode 2, but we only saw some of them on screen. And I do think at the end of the trailer that was shown at Star Wars Celebration, we do see a bunch of Jedi igniting their lightsabers. That's going to be so satisfying. Leslye Headland then talks about morally grey characters in the show. Just like we're going to see in Ahsoka with Baylan and Shin, much earlier in the timeline in the High Republic, there are those that are not morally consistent. Here's what she says, but at the same time, I think you see more morally ambiguous characters than you've seen in any other Star Wars content. And I think I can say this pretty confidently. I don't think you're going to see action in any other shows the way that you see it used and utilised in our show. And I've said this before, there is so much controversy and gossip and drama surrounding the Acolyte. There are some fans who just don't want to see it, some fans not interested, some fans are not happy with things Leslye Headland has said, and I can understand that. But at the same time, this has the potential to be the Jedi show we've all wanted. For a long time, Star Wars fans have criticised Disney Star Wars for the lack of lightsabers. Well, this show could be one of the ones that gives us that, along with the Ahsoka series. At the moment, we have 8 new Jedi actors already confirmed to appear in this show, most of which remain unnamed, including Eunice Otomo's Wookiee Jedi Master, Cal Naka, and Rebecca Henderson's Venestra Rowe, who did appear in Phase 1 novels of the High Republic books. Star Wars is no stranger to Jedi, but with the promise that we're going to see more Jedi than ever before, that is so exciting because more than a few familiar names could crop up, and even new characters are ones we could become attached to. The novelty of getting new Star Wars Jedi characters is something that all fans would want to hear. I don't want to judge this show before it drops, but I have been very excited by a lot of the press. Those who saw the trailer at Star Wars Celebration said it was amazing, and so now, staying on the same subject, the other day a copy of the Acolyte trailer was posted to YouTube, and before it was taken down, some fans were able to catch a few incredible details, and I want to share those leaks with you now. As always guys, massive spoiler warning. So here are some new tidbits for the show. So in the early bit of the trailer, we see the unnamed assassin, Amanda Stenberg, walking through a town. Now in the past, some people said this was reminiscent of Coruscant, but it's more reminiscent of the samurai influence of Corvus from Mando. Japanese elements inspired this series very clearly, and very true to how George Lucas conceptualized Star Wars in the first place. Li Jung-jae's Jedi Master has long hair in the style of Qui-Gon Jinn. One of the Jedi younglings at the start is a Tarsant. The younglings from Young Jedi Adventures do not feature in this trailer. Bear in mind they're on Tanu with Jedi Master Yoda, and that could give a good reason if he doesn't appear in the Acolyte. So the next tidbit is that some scenes look better edited than others, but there is a long time to improve on that. At least the lighting is better than Obi-Wan Kenobi. It seems like the cinematography generally is also a bit better, so don't write off this show just yet. As I mentioned before, there are lots of yellow lightsabers, they're going to be prevalent throughout the show. Coruscant does feature, as does the Jedi High Council. As I just mentioned, Venestra Row is confirmed, the Trade Federation features, and we see an Amoidian, very similar to Newt Gunray and the ones we saw in the prequel trilogy, but these are new, and they do look amazing, the skin texture especially. And the ice planet that was believed to be Scipio is a new one that we haven't seen before. And this was inspired by Frozen, one of the influences on the show according to Leslye Headland. So those are just a couple of takeaways. The show does sound very exciting. It might be amazing, you never know. And so staying on the subject of the Acolyte, there has been a lot of talk of Leslye Headland breaking George Lucas rules, and she took a lot of joy in doing this again. In this case, she's not the first to do it, and George Lucas eased up on this rule, and through Dave Filoni we got Gungi. This rule, of course, is not having any Wookiee Jedi. Creativity changes, ideas change, and eventually George Lucas relented, so this is nothing too new. We even have Buryaga in the High Republic, and so at this stage there are several documented Wookiee Jedi, and now we're going to get a new one, the one played by Eunice Suotomo, who also plays Chewbacca in the sequels and Solo. But this Jedi is Cal Narka, and Leslye Headland explains the joy of bringing him to life. Here's what Leslye said. We thought it'd be cool to do a Wookiee. Obviously they have a Wookiee in the High Republic, and I thought it'd be cool to have our own version of a very different character design. And I did bring this up the other day, she really was inspired by Solo: A Star Wars Story. She wanted to push the boundaries of what a Wookiee performance could look like. She recalls watching the 2018 film and saying, gosh, it'd be really cool to see him be a Jedi, and actually do some action work and some fighting, and to not just have a sidekick role. And it kind of started there, and I didn't think they would let me do it. And I just kept pitching and pitching. And Neil Scanlon really loved the idea as well. I especially love the idea of having a Wookiee with the side of his head shaved, so that's something new as well. She goes on to finish, a lot of the times we come up with characters, even Amanda Stenberg and Lee Jung-jae's characters, they come up almost from character design first. I can see the way they look in the costumes that they wear. I'm a very visual person in that sense, so that's how Cal Narka came to be. I just couldn't resist being on set with a Wookiee. It was very selfish of me, and I can understand some fans taking issue with the way she words this, because there is a sentiment that she's been a bit selfish with a lot of creative decisions, but the Wookiee is not the problem, at least I don't think so. So a Wookiee Jedi with half of his head shaved, and he's not just going to be sitting around like a lot of the Jedi from the High Council do in the prequels. In this show he's going to fight, he's going to use his lightsaber. It's fine in animation with Gungi when you're doing the Clone Wars and the Bad Batch, but in live action they have to be very careful to not make it look too comedic. I'm not going to lie to you, I'm actually really curious about this. What is this going to look like? Eunice is awesome, his passion for Chewie is so contagious, he's a big Star Wars fan, and with everyone working on the show with stunt doubles, there was a lot of work put into this to get it right. And I'm really keeping my fingers crossed we can trust Leslye Headland's confidence. Is it well placed? I hope so. Share your thoughts on this and everything we spoke about in the comments down below. If you enjoyed this video guys, please be sure to give me a big fat thumbs up, subscribe if you're new, and I'll see you in the next one. May the Force be with you, always.